Welcome to the Taking the Leap podcast, where you can learn how to launch your full-time career in this part-time gig economy. No matter what career you're in, you have the potential to be the best version of you and overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Bonvera, Bob Dickey.
Welcome back to Taking the Leap podcast. I'm your host, Bob Dickey, and I am so excited to have a good friend of mine in our virtual studio today, coming from the great state of Texas, Beiler. And let me give you a little bit of background of Miss Beiler here. Now, for those of you who have traveled around the globe and you've walked through a mall, you have walked through an airport and smelled the most delicious, unbelievable concoction known to man, you have probably walked past a world famous Auntie Anne's Pretzels little shop, full of dough and salt and incredible butter. My family, when we go to a mall, that is where we ultimately go, as all the kids want to make sure they get an Auntie Anne's Pretzels, and we have none other than the founder of this billion-dollar global enterprise, Ann Beiler, coming from Texas to our studio today. And so, Ann, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We've had the opportunity to participate, and you've been part of conferences that I've held in the past with Crown, and your story is so encouraging, and we couldn't be more pleased to have you be a part of this program, so thank you.
Well, Bob, it is my pleasure, and just when I got the invite from you, I'm like, of course, I want to do this podcast with Bob, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
Well, it's our honor, and I know our listeners are really going to enjoy learning a little more of your story. I mean, we at Bonvera and on Taking the Leap podcast, we really celebrate entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial journey. Our listeners are really wanting to glean and learn insights from other entrepreneurs, and specifically how they got started, their background, and the challenges that they overcame to build their entrepreneurial pursuit, their business. Your background is just so impressive, and that the story is really inspirational for me and my daughters. So as a father of four daughters, and living in this kind of, it's no matter how you look at it, so we're living in a very kind of crazy time right now. And I know that there's many parents like me who have young children that are coming up. We want to maybe be able to educate, teach, train, prepare our children to be able to be successful in life. There's a lot of people, the old adage of go to school, get good grades, graduate, get a good job. I think a lot of these social norms from the past no longer hold true. And I'm seeing young people who feel like their pathway to success is to go down these traditional paths, and they're saddling themselves with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and they're working hard, and they get out on the other side, and they're not finding a job, they're not finding a career, they're not finding their passion. And parents are watching this, and they're like, what do we do to help our children have success? And then I take a look at your story. Your pathway to success was untraditional. And I think that there's a lot to be learned. And I want my daughter, as a father of four daughters, I want to ask you just selfishly, I want to take a couple moments here. I'm just going to be selfish and say, give me some advice. Give me things that I could share with my children, my daughters. But here you are, a young girl growing up in an Amish community outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You have a 7th, 8th grade education, and you go on to start Auntie Anne's Pretzels, which becomes a $1 billion plus global franchise. And it's just an unremarkable story. Now, I know God's been with you along the way of answered prayers, but what are some of the things, or what advice would you give my daughters today saying, Dad, I want to be just like Auntie Anne. I want to be like Ann Beiler. What did she learn? How did she navigate all this? What advice would you give young girls?
Oh, Bob, it's really a delight to be back on your show today, and thank you very much for allowing me to share some bits and pieces of my story, and as best as I can encourage young girls or young mothers or anyone thinking about going in business. I'll do it to the best of my ability today. So thank you for that. I feel like there's so many lessons I've learned away, but let's go back to what I learned as a kid, and which every father and every mother can do this for their children. And it simply is to teach them responsibility at a very young age. Teach them to be contributors to society rather than simply a consumer. Teach them to be contributors in the family rather than just having their own needs met. Teach them at a very young age that it's more important to give to others than it is to take from others. I mean, Bob, there's so many little simple practical steps that my parents taught me. And by the time I was 19, I was mature enough to get married and have my very own family. Now, some people may gasp at the thought of that, but in the Amish Mennonite community, it's very common to marry at a very young age. But they teach you all those things so that you become a responsible citizen, and so that when you get married, you can manage your own household without the help of mom and dad. So if that sounds like I lived in another era and another time on planet Earth, I guess it's true. But at the same time, Bob, these are age-old principles that have worked from the beginning of time. And I feel like sometimes we miss some of the greatest truths about what it means to parent our children well, and what it means to train those coming behind us with these very simple and yet difficult but truths. And yet, when you get that into your spirit and that becomes part of your DNA, faith, community, hard work, honoring your parents, respecting those around you. I mean, does this even sound like anything that you should or could carry into business, Bob?
Absolutely. It reminds me of some of the things that I'm hearing in the news, and we're talking about generations today that are experiencing they call it extended adolescence and delayed adulthood. And it strikes me that what you are talking about, it used to be where adulthood would start as you're graduating high school and it's like, hey, you're an adult, you're 17, 18 years old, you're starting to get into adulthood. Now, with this new term of delayed adulthood is happening in the 30s. And so the question I would have, it seems like what you're articulating, your background, your parents instilled a great deal of responsibility and discipline in you, and you didn't have extended adolescence. You actually had an accelerated adulthood where you were, hey, I'm mature, I'm ready to go, let's hit this. It's hard to have success if you're still trying to be a kid, right?
Absolutely. And what I mentioned to you are things that are really important in business. I mean, it's what I was taught. I couldn't wait to be an adult. I mean, I couldn't wait to become responsible. And it was somewhat like I couldn't wait to show my mom and dad. I mean, I really didn't think about it in that way, like that precise with my thinking. But ultimately, I really wanted to take what my parents taught me and work it in my own life. And I feel like what you're talking about, the extended, adolescence, I can't relate to that at all. What I can relate to is seeing kids when I'm out and about, Bob, and I see hard workers in a restaurant or a department store, or when I pick up, when I go to a mini mart to get gas or some groceries, you can spot someone that is responsible. There's an air about them that lets you know this kid, someone's taught him how to be responsible. And very often I will ask them, so who taught you how to be responsible and how to work? I noticed that you're a very good employee. And it always brings a smile to their face, and they always have an answer for me without thinking.
So, Ann, it just strikes me as you're chatting about these things, I'll have parents that will contact me and ask questions like, well, what technology courses should my kids be taking? What degreed programs should they be taking? How can I help my child be set up for success? And there's all sorts of little things that you could potentially do that would be meaningful in today's global economy. But if I take a look at going back to the basics, if we teach our children how to be, and we demonstrate this, how to be responsible, how to be a person that exemplifies discipline, a self-starter, someone who's accountable, people skills. I mean, you were just talking about chatting with children and young people and asking them questions, and I'm sure they're sitting there looking you in the eye and they're give a firm handshake. We think these are just basics, but these are the building blocks of success. If you can really navigate these types of things and have these in your tool belt, you're setting yourself apart from so many different people to be successful in life, right?
That's fantastic. You're right. And the other thing that I feel like part of what we're talking about right now is the discipline part of it. Most people don't understand the power of discipline. And discipline is really, most times, Bob, it's doing something you don't feel like doing. Mm-hmm. And but you do that long enough and often enough, and eventually it becomes a part of your work habits. Mm-hmm. And the discipline of it, which was hard at the beginning, now becomes joy, nearly, because it's like every morning you wake up and brush your teeth. Well, it's because it's a part of your daily routine. And when you discipline yourself with good work habits, over time, it just becomes a part of the routine of your life. And when you find yourself in a place of where there's great challenges, for example, where I found myself in business was, wow, I didn't know anything about business, but my discipline habits, took me into this place of, I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. And I feel like discipline is really about doing what you don't feel like doing until you get to the point where there's joy in doing it.
I've got to imagine that Auntie Anne's Pretzels wasn't an overnight international success, and that there were probably at least a few days, maybe a few weeks or months, or maybe, years. I was going to let you say it, few years, where you had to be disciplined as you're slogging it out. You're working hard. You're getting up every morning. There may have been doubts in your mind like, oh my goodness, is this ever going to work? Are we ever going to turn the corner? How do you remain disciplined during those times? Because it's super easy to be disciplined when you're an international, it's a huge success, and you're on the front page of newspapers and magazines and everyone's lauding you. It's super easy to be disciplined then, right? It's like, so that the story is, are you disciplined during those dark days when you're just slogging it out? I'm curious. What did you do?
Well, so you're taking me back in my memory here, but what I know is what I mentioned earlier. Responsibility helps you become a mature person. Mm-hmm. So even though I didn't know anything about business when I started Auntie Anne, I was almost 40 years old, but I had grown in my interpersonally. I was a mature person. I had two kids, mm-hmm. Two girls, 11 and 16 at the time, and so I was mature, and I was a responsible person. And when I entered the workforce, building the foundation of Auntie Anne's was it was the most difficult journey that I'd ever encountered. Mm. I knew how to overcome a lot of things in my life. I'd experienced, which we talked about in your previous podcast, I'd experienced the death of our daughter and the abuse of our pastor, and overcoming all of those things in my life really helped me to know that I could overcome anything or any obstacle that I faced. So facing obstacles, it was common to me. Okay. I had done that in my past, but when it came to the business life, it was not overcoming so much those obstacles personally, but it was the business thing that kept coming my way that I absolutely knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about franchising. I knew that McDonald's was a franchise. I knew the word. I knew about that, but I didn't understand what franchising meant. I didn't know anything about training people. I didn't know anything about writing manuals about, or even writing a mission statement or a purpose statement. I knew nothing about that. So initially, Bob, it was going back to my roots. It was discipline. It was hard work. I would get up every morning, and there were times, literally, that I did not feel like getting up and facing the day because there were so many things to do, so many calls to make, so many meetings to attend, so many people to contact, that the responsibilities of that day wanted to keep me in bed. I mean, literally, when I say that, I mean that literally.
It's almost feeling overwhelming. You're just like, where do I even start? Completely.
And I lived that way for many weeks and many months. But again, I learned that discipline and doing what you don't feel like doing has great rewards. And I say that, Bob, with emotion because that's the piece that's missing, I feel like, in so many young entrepreneurs, people that dream about, owning their own company. They want to be a CEO of a company, or they want to just have a little pop and mom shop in their neighborhood. The discipline part of it and the hard work ethic is what I would keep going back to. It's like I was a little girl all over again, Bob. I knew I had to get up out of bed and milk the cows, even if I didn't feel like it. I knew I had to get up out of bed and get to my to-do list and do that even when I didn't feel like it. Initially I couldn't delegate. I didn't have the money. We weren't making, the kind of money that I could do to hire everybody to do things for me. So initially, you got to do it all. I had to do it all for the first couple of years. My husband and I, my 2 daughters, and 7 or 8 employees in the 2 stores that we opened up. We did it all, and then from there, we saw the beauty and the joy of growing 2 stores and then 12 stores, and like, wow! Now I can look back 2 years and I say, we did all of that with about 8 or 10 people. It was unbelievable to me, and I'm thinking, okay, now the discipline paid off. Now I can see better. I can see my potential. I can actually see what I can accomplish. So there are no shortcuts to experience. And you may have a degree, and I am so all about education, even though I didn't have the honor or the privilege. I got my GED when I was 50 years old. But there's, I feel like education I have to say this carefully, but to some degree, it puts us in a box.
It does. Unfairly.
If you do, totally. If you stay in this, do exactly what we tell you to do, then you're going to be successful. And guess what? That's a myth. It's really not true. What I discovered, Bob, is that when you live outside of the box of the rules and the ways and the teachings, I guess, of this world and of higher education, if you can take yourself outside of that box, what I know, Bob, is that's where God lives. Because that is unlimited territory. And if anybody had a reason to stay in the box of, I can't because of whatever the reasons are that we give ourselves. I could have stayed right there and I could have said, I don't have formal education. I don't have a business plan. I don't have any capital. And when I say that's literally, I had none of those when I started the company. So you got to believe in the fact that there's more inside of you than what anyone has told you.
Yes.
And you got to begin to develop yourself and your skills outside of the educational system, because I don't know, I've never gone to college. I have a couple of honorary doctorate degrees, but I don't know, and you can tell me yes or no on this, but I feel like the most important degree that anyone could get going through college would be the people skills, the power, and the development of people skills. That's really, to me, that is the most important piece that you will ever take into the workforce.
It's interesting that you highlight that. I certainly agree. I've also had a professor that has said that the average shelf life of a college degree today is 3 years. Because the world is changing so rapidly that the things that you learn in college will basically be irrelevant within a couple of years. And so his comment to the class was, the most important thing about college is developing an appetite for learning. Learn how to learn. Become a lifelong learner. You're going to be on this journey your entire career, and so that's the most important thing. If in colleges and schools, if they can inspire just this voracious appetite to learn and self-improve, to take knowledge and information and leverage it into whatever career field you're in, those are the most important things to have. So I 100% agree with what you've shared there. I want to go back to training because you highlighted training a second ago, and I think there's a very robust training program that Auntie Anne's has with their franchisees. And
absolutely.
And that was a very important part. You were figuring out, hey, how do we train our people? How do we set them up for success? But you also highlighted, so I want to talk about that, but you also highlighted something about those moments when you're early on in your journey where you were laying in bed and you're like, I feel so overwhelmed. I feel there's so much to do. Where do I even get started? And one of the things that I've done in my life, and there's many days that I will wake up and feel the exact same way. And the best way for me to process that is I'm a guy that likes to write down lists. If I can put it down into a list, if it lives in my head, and my head's just full of all these running details, it confuses me. I don't even know where to start. But as soon as I can put a list together of here's my daily plan, here's my weekly plan, here's my monthly plan, I start having concrete plans I can look at. I can be checking it off. I can know I'm prioritizing the number one thing first. No, I'm not going to waste time on this. That's not as meaningful. And it almost empowers me. And now I've got a clear action plan for the day, for the week, for the month. And it's invigorating for me to go down that list and be clicking things off. And then there'll be things that there'll be times where I'm thinking about it, I'm stressing about it. I'm like, why am I stressing about this? That's insignificant. I don't even need to worry about it. Okay, check that one off. I'm not even doing it. So that's a little hack that I have. Is there anything like that you did when you were growing through?
Oh, well, listen, Bob, I cannot imagine life without a list. Mm-hmm. I began that practice immediately because there was too many things in my day. And it's funny you mentioned that because right now in my life, to bring you up to speed on where I'm at, I mean, my life is not as hectic as what it was for 20 years making pretzels and building a company, obviously. But still, at my age, so the point is this: a list is good whether you're very young or much older. Last night, so the practice that I still do is write my list down. And I have it on my phone, on my pages, but I also have a paper copy on my kitchen counter. And last evening, before I went to bed, I looked at my emails. Not a good idea, okay? Because you cannot do anything about your emails. Well, I mean, I suppose you can, but I don't work at night. Right. So I looked at my phone and my emails, and there was a number of things that came up that I didn't notice until about 9:30 last night. And my mind started racing. The power of lists, you described it perfectly. I thought, okay, so I get my legal pad out and I write, there was about 11 things that were really bugging me, and they were all jumbled up in my head. So I wrote them all down last night about 10 o'clock. And you know what? I went to sleep and forgot about it. And this morning, my head was clear, and I went down over my list. I realized, this is really not a big deal. And I checked off about 3 of them already. So it's only 11 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. The power of the list. And I'm really glad that you brought it up. It's so, you know what, Bob? I honestly, keep it simple. Mm-hmm. It's really the little things and the simple things that take you into your next level of maturity, of business, of opportunity. Mm-hmm. If we cannot manage the small things like what we're talking about right now, we'll never be able to manage a large company or the bigger things that may come our way, the bigger opportunities. So just some simple habits like that will help you. And you also mentioned becoming you talked about having an appetite for learning. That's critical.
Yes.
It's critical. And as long as you have an appetite for learning, you're going to keep growing. I mean, if at the end of 12 or 35 stores, I wouldn't have had the appetite for learning. By now, Bob, I'm reading every book that I can get my hands on when it comes to leadership, management, franchising, training, all the things that I needed to know. I began to pick up books, and every time I took a trip, I didn't read a lot at home because I wasn't at home very much. But every trip that I took, I would take a book or two with me and learn more. So, the appetite for learning is a part of your personal growth, your professional growth, and for me, it was also my emotional and spiritual growth. You have to grow in all four of those areas if you want to become truly successful. Right. And when I say successful, I don't want people to understand or to feel like it has to be a grand and glorious franchise around the world. That is not success. That's not how I define success. I define success as, are you doing what you love to do? I mean, you may be a successful mother of one child or 6 or 7 kids, and at the end of the day, you can put your head on the pillow and you can say, I did my very best.
Yes.
To me, Bob, that's success.
Amen.
Because when you do your very best, if you're a mom and pop operator in a little donut shop, and you know that you have treated your people well, you have been kind to every customer that came to your window, even though you feel bad, you may be having a bad day and you may be feeling down, but you can rise above that. And that's where people skills comes in at. If you can treat others with love, kindness, and respect, and you will be able to lay your head down at night with peace and know that you have given it your best. Bob, that is, in my opinion, success.
Amen. I agree 100%. I think that I'm not one who likes to put labels on people, certainly not labels on my children. I'm a big believer that God has gifted everybody uniquely.
Yes.
And that each one of us has a special purpose and reason for being here. And that what God's called me to do is different than what God's called you to do.
Yes.
And there's not a one size fits all that we should be shooting for to be like, well, to be successful in life, I've got to do this. No, you nailed it perfectly. It's like, at the end of the day, you know that you did your absolute best. You're striving to make a difference in people's lives. You're striving to make a difference in the world. These are things that we desperately need. And some of the most successful people on the planet probably are not going to be heralded in the pages of Fortune magazine or the Wall Street Journal, but they are having huge impact doing exactly what God's called them to do. And I salute them. I give them a high five. I'm like, man, we need people like that. Amen.
Absolutely.
One of the things that here you are, you're on your journey. You've highlighted that early on. It's really important to have responsibility and discipline. Sometimes you can wake up in the morning and just feel completely overwhelmed, and you're still getting up out of bed. You're like, all right, I'm going to make my list, and I'm going to go and do these various things because I'm a person of responsibility and discipline. I'm a self-starter. And you're navigating, months, you said even years of just a lot of hard work before you're having, the success that we all know of Auntie Anne's Pretzels today. And in the midst of all this, intuitively, you're like, I know that I've got to read. I got to be a voracious reader. I'm reading leadership books, I'm marketing books, and you're reading anything and everything that's applicable to you being successful in your business. And at the same time, you're creating and developing a training program for your company. Tell me what as you were creating this training and program company for. So you have a voracious appetite for education, but now you're training others so that they can be successful. What were some of the things that you were trying to incorporate into this training program, and how were you trying to help employees and staff members to have the right foundation as you're growing this company?
Well, so as you're saying all of that, I'm realizing once again the importance of training. So there's so much in that subject right there. But in my own experience, I knew early on intuitively, not that anyone told me this because, once again, I didn't know, But intuitively, I knew that if my one little store was going to reach the potential, and I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew that once we developed the pretzel, that in some crazy way, I knew that to be consistent with our product was really important, although nobody told me that.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that meant that I had to, initially my training was, I'm just going to tell you what to do on the fly, so I have 8 or 9 people working in my store. And I knew that if I could, I'm not standing around telling people what to do.
Right.
It's like a football team.
Right.
The coach is on the sideline, helping all the players. They're telling them how to do it. And I saw myself as a coach and working alongside my team.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out that when I roll the pretzels, I'm rolling pretzels as fast as I can. But from there, I can see what everybody else is doing. I can watch the interaction with the customer by the seller. I can watch the baker who's baking the ovens. I can watch the one who's doing the work behind me. And I began to just simply, and make it simple, to bark out orders. Okay, we need to do this. So it was for 8 months, I just really understood as I'm watching everybody do their work. No, the product is not ready to take out of the oven. So no, you can't do that right now. Or yes, that's a great idea. So I became a verbal coach, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I opened my second store, I realized, wow, okay, how am I going to do this? But then, Bob, is when I learned the power and the wisdom of delegating. And I had my one sister, and she had worked with me for 8 months. And so she knew exactly what I wanted. And what I didn't realize then was that I was actually training her to manage a store. All right, that was my initial response to training people. And that became my model, literally, was to bring people into my environment. It was initially with stores, and then it was in the corporate office, and bring them into my environment and walk around every Monday morning. And I would talk to my people, and I'd ask them questions. I would talk to them about their lives. I would ask them questions about how work is going and how are you doing in your department. And so training is not just simply barking out orders like I did initially, but training is really role modeling. And training is really talking to your people to help them understand who you are, because the bigger you get, the more you, the leader, the owner, you get lost, and your voice becomes smaller than the rest of the team. So my way of training, teaching, and being with people was simply by understanding that if I create relationships with people, if I train people to be excellent in what we're trying to accomplish, and in the training period, it's all about loving, respecting them, honoring them, and to let them know that you care. They're going to carry the mantle for you. And the training was all about helping them understand that we have to be consistent with the product, with our customer service, with the cleanliness of our stores, and then the bigger picture was to appeal to the franchisees. If they see the Auntie Ann store, they see how the employees are working the store, they see the great product. I call it the threefold philosophy. We start a training program in the store. Franchisees come in, they look at that, and it's appealing. They come to corporate, and now we have a whole big training manual for them to follow the business model. So you see, I feel like sometimes we miss, again, the basics of training. And it's not me, the owner of the company, barking out orders how everything needs to be done forever. But it's really about role modeling what is important to you. And you do that with grace and kindness. Let me tell you, people will come flocking to you. They want to work for you, and they will carry out your purpose, which is amazing to me. They will carry out your purpose without you being the boss or the one yelling at them and screaming and making sure that they know how to do everything. No, no. When you understand that you are leading them, you are the example in everything. To me, That's the greatest training program. And then you may ask, well, how do you do that when you have 1,000 stores?
Yeah.
Well, that's another part of training, but initially it's how we trained.
It strikes me that you spent many years developing experience and subject matter knowledge and expertise in your particular field. And so you were the reservoir of all of that knowledge and experience. And so when you're creating your very first store, for it to work well, as long as you were there to be able to say, guys, okay, here's the temperature of the oven, put it in for this long, take it out. Now's when we put the butter on. No, we put the salt on. Now here's this. You've got everything dialed up. You know exactly, because you how many pretzels have you burned? How many trash cans have been full of product that wasn't right? But you had it all dialed in. You spent years dialing it in. And so, number one, you had all that experience. You're the reservoir. Then you realize, I've got to take this reservoir of knowledge and start to teach and train people around me. Oh my goodness, the only way I'm going to be able to scale this from one store to 2 stores to 10 to hundreds and thousands all over the world is to create a training system where I can take my knowledge and experience and give it to other people. I love the way that you talked about you being relational. So in the midst of your teaching and training, you are still very focused on the relational aspect of how are you doing, how's your family doing, and making sure you're building those bonds of community. But over time, you create this system where a new person, a new franchisee could walk in the door and say, hey, you know what, Ann, I'd rather not spend 5 or 6 years learning all the lessons that you learned. You've done that. I just want to take your playbook. I want to take your manual, and I want to take your reservoir of knowledge, give it to me. And thank you for this playbook. I'm going to go execute it. Now, on day one, I can have success. I don't have to go through that 5-year learning curve for that you did. That's the power, I think, of having a mentor and a coach. That's one of the things I love about the franchise systems is that people like you learned the lesson, put it in a playbook, and then can give it to somebody else and say, hey, guess what? Here's a shortcut to success.
Absolutely, I think you're so right. And we talked about people and people's skills, and training is really investing in others. Mm-hmm. You're investing time, money. That's where I feel like that's where it's easy to overlook the importance of training, because truly, it is an investment of your time. Mm-hmm. Your money. Because every time I walked the office, and there was 150 or 200 employees in the office, it took time for me to do that, valuable time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes we overlook, but let me tell you, that was the connection with me and also my connection with the employees. So as we took that outside of our own corporate office and kind of help franchisees understand the importance of training. Well, now it means that they may need to invest in their employees mm-hmm. and send them to the Gap office for a week or 2 of training, which means invest money into their business. So that's why I feel like, Bob, many companies shortcut the investment or the training process because it does mean time and money. Mm-hmm. And most times people say, I don't have the time and I certainly don't have the capital. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if we understand the value of that, it's like putting money in the bank. I mean, you invest it in a great stock. You buy into a great stock because you believe that there's gonna be a return. Mm-hmm. I know, Bob, that if we believe in our people and we invest in them, I cannot tell you the return of the investment. Mm-hmm. Here I am at this point in my life, and I'm still amazed at the power of that. And today, Auntie Ann's, even through COVID, they suffered greatly, like every other company in the country, in the world, I guess, which breaks my heart. But in spite of that, I'm talking about me spending time with employees. Maybe I'm focusing a little bit too much on that, but what that did was it gave the employees security about the company. Mm-hmm. And when I sold the company, it wasn't about me. It was about the product, and it was about the purpose. And when we sold the company, it just kept soaring. And so today, Auntie Anne's getting through COVID. I'm in touch with my one brother who's still there. He's been there for almost 30 years. Wow. And he has such a heavy heart and such a, like, all these, things that they've never experienced. But the mission and the purpose of the company is still there.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is that your training program seems like it was very relational. You invested your time, your energy. You were very relational with people that you were coaching and mentoring. It's very different than someone saying, "Here's a book, here's an audio, here's go watch this video. Good luck." That's a completely different type of. Right. This is you were very intentional in building relationships with the people that you were coaching and mentoring. And even as the company was growing, and there's thousands of employees geographically separated all over the place, you were still able to create a program that was highly relational. And it strikes me that highly relational program's got to be a lot more successful than, just a repository somewhere where you can just say, yeah, go pick up a book and read it and good luck.
That's so, but that's the easy thing to do, Bob. Go pick up his book, read it, and you'll learn so much from the book. Books are important. And as I said, I was constantly reading. And a book that I read after the fact, I read the book, Abe Lincoln on leadership. It's a really small book, and you can get through it very quickly. But his example, he was dubbed with an MBWA, managed by walking around. Okay. That was his deal. And when I read that book after 15 years of Auntie Anne's, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that most people didn't do that. Like, I didn't realize that was really important, because many days, in essence, that's what I did. I guess I managed by walking around. I hated, when I use the word hate, I use it sparingly, but I truly mean I did not like to be sitting behind the desk 9 hours a day. I wanted to be with the people. When I picked up that book, the biggest part about the success of Abe Lincoln's life was that he wanted to be with the people. I would encourage people to go get the book,
right?
And then you can understand what I'm trying to say, because you cannot. Encourage your people, I want to say effectively, if you never show up.
That's right. So you're what you're saying, Ann, is that you didn't sit behind a desk and just send text messages and instant messages and on Slack and emails. I mean, so it's important for the leader who's growing a company and growing a team to actually be boots on the ground, on the front line, locking arms, doing the actual things. So you were leading by example, is what you're telling me.
And you know what? That's what leadership is all about. Lead by example. And okay, let me be quick to say, I was not by far the perfect leader. I'm telling you, I stumbled. I fell off the wagon a few times. I went to my management team meetings in tears. I mean, like, really, I was so unprofessional initially. I learned how to become professional by watching people. And that sounds silly. I know you learn all that in college, but I watched it. I watched people wherever I went to see, I guess I shouldn't do it that way, or I shouldn't dress that way, or literally how I dressed became an obstacle for me. I didn't know how am I supposed to dress. And I didn't even have mentors around me to tell me anything. I was too busy building the company. But learning to be with the people and understanding that I don't know it all, and falling off the wagon is okay. I mean, listen, it's okay to say, I don't know that. I didn't know. And to be willing to ask the questions. I was always a little girl, a teenager, a mom. I was always curious. I was born with curiosity, and I was never afraid to ask questions. And so it's okay to think and to believe and to know I don't know everything, but I can ask questions and I can learn from other people as I'm stumbling my way through this learning curve of building this amazing company.
So leaders are good question askers. That's important.
Love
Look, and so tell me, if you had tried to build your business the other way and you had said, you know what, I'm the CEO. I've been on the front lines. I've been out there in the shops. I've been, rolling dough and baking stuff. And, I've been at the cash registers. I don't want to be on the front lines anymore. I'm just going to sit back in my nice CEO suite, and I'm going to let people who want to ask questions, they can come, they can fly into the corporate office, and I'll have a series of board meetings, and people can come talk to me. I'll give them my knowledge because I'm this very experienced person, but I'm not going to be a leader that gets out on the front lines. I'm just going to sit back here. I'm going to transition into coaching and mentoring other people. How do you think that would have worked?
Well, I just feel like you have to be boots on the ground to understand what your company is all about. I mean, you can have a great product, but if you can't implement that in ways that's appealing to the customer, they don't want your product. So I feel like boots on the ground and my experience with the people. I mean, first of all, I never really had a huge executive suite. I didn't care about that.
Right.
I mean, people would come to I will never forget when people from all the way, the people came from Jakarta, Indonesia. I mean, it's silly to me now, but at the time I didn't know, but we were in a strip center and my office was maybe 6 by 8. I don't know. It was a very small little office with a desk. I was a working CEO.
Right.
I didn't need a desk. And okay, I know that sounds strange for a lot of CEOs in the suites of the CEO suites around the country. And I've been there and I've experienced all that. I understand all that. But that was never, Bob, that was never important to me. When the people from Jakarta, Indonesia came, we gave them directions as to how to get to our office. As they came into our small town, they went to another city because they saw the sign Auntie, but they were looking for this huge corporate executive suite in this huge building. So next spring, they called us and said, hey, we got to town last night and we got to Gap, Pennsylvania, but we're in Lancaster City right now because we couldn't find your executive suite. We couldn't find your corporate office. So we met them, where we were. And so they come back to our little teeny tiny little executive suite in Gap, Pennsylvania. And they were just shocked. But we, Bob, it's really all about maximizing your finances. It's about maximizing your potential. It's about maxing your presence, your presence, your product presence in the world, and you can do that without all the extras. And again, it goes back to my years of growing up on the farm and just maximizing, doing the very best you can with what you have. It sounds way too simple for most people to grasp, but that's really my message. Maximize what you have, and you don't have to overextend yourself to be successful or even impressive. I never tried to impress people. That was really not part of my thinking.
Well, I buy into the exact same philosophy. We have very modest headquarter offices. I'm a stickler with trying to keep costs as low as possible. I realize that the value of a company is not in its office space and all those types of things. Those are expenses, right? And I try to keep expenses low and profits high. So one of my very first kind of maybe business experiences, and I wasn't even in the business world at the time, but it was an individual that I greatly respected, and I thought this person was a really, a high flyer business guy. I was actually in high school at the time, and this individual had just started a business, and they got the best office space in Michigan, and this guy went out and immediately got a Corvette, and it was spending money right and left. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, look, I want to go in business when I get older. Look at how awesome this is. Little do I know, looking back, the business went under about a year and a half later. And as I'm looking back on it, it was the guy got just so excited about his idea and was just levered the whole thing up with debt and was spending money like a drunken sailor. And of course, you can see how foolish it looks like at the time. But I think there's a lot of people in the business world who still play those games, right? It's like it's all about the show. And so I love the fact that you were really dialed into managing your costs, understanding the value of a business, and not trying to have all the flashy stuff. That's a great story and a great reminder, especially Bonvera has a lot of young entrepreneurs that we're teaching and training that are coming up, and I think those are really good points for them to remember, for all of us to remember as we're building our businesses. I want to take a quick pivot on one particular topic, and I want to get some insight from you. Early on in this conversation, just a few moments ago, you happened to mention, it was a passing comment, and you were talking about all the various things that you had learned growing up on the farm as a young Amish girl, and the responsibility and the discipline, all the things that your parents had taught you, and then you had been an adult for a number of years. But it was a passing comment. You said, well, it's important to remember I started Auntie Anne's when I was about 40 years old. And it strikes me that we live in a society today that really celebrates all of these wonder kids who are starting billion-dollar businesses at the age of 17, 18. You've got and we hear the stories, right? So Bill Gates drops out of college and he goes and starts Microsoft, and then Steve Jobs drops out of college, he starts Apple. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, and almost on a monthly basis, we can pick up a Fortune magazine or Forbes, and on the front cover is some young, super smart teenager or early 20s that has started one of these companies, and it almost feels like I've been hearing other commentators talking about how we're creating an environment where people feel like if they didn't have massive success in their early 20s or 30s, that somehow time has passed them by, the ship has sailed, and there's so many people that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are like, I guess it's not for me. It just, it wasn't to be. And I'm thinking to myself, you're a prime example. You're an individual who started an incredible company at the age of 40. And I've got a list of iconic American companies that were started by people in their 50s and their 60s. I'm hearing that 60 is because of the healthcare that we have now and the advancements in technology. They're saying 60 is the new 40. They're telling people of my generation, be prepared to live to 100 and past 100 if you're having good, healthy lifestyles. Don't think you're going to be retiring at the age of 65. At the age of 65, you're now in the sweet spot of your career. So what advice would you give people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who might have bought into some of this? I'll call it a lie, that success happens when you're in your 20s. It's like, no, we've got all sorts of opportunity ahead of us. You're a classic example of someone who started a company at the age of 40. And what did you learn? And I would imagine that you were equipped and trained and had all the right things at the age of 40 for you to be able to do this. And you probably weren't mature enough at the age of 20 to do Auntie Anne's.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I experienced life. I mean, real life. Things were hard for me. Not my growing up years or my teens or my early marriage, but the life is hard, God is good. I'm not confused about the two anymore. But I experienced some really, really hard stuff. From the age of 26 until I was 36, 37, 10, 11 years of real dark times in my life that I thought I was going under emotionally, physically, and I really felt like it was life was so bad I wanted to commit suicide. And I say that in all honesty. I was so despaired about life. And so I understand what people have been to that extreme of life, feeling like it's over for me at the age of 35 or 40. But I really, truly felt like life was over for me. And so this is the part, Bob, that I just have to mention. And that is that if I hadn't believed that God is bigger than any one of my problems, I would never have survived the hardships of my own life. And by the time I was 37, 38, I truly believed that life was over for me. I remember sitting in the back pew of a church, feeling like I'd gotten through all these terrible years of darkness of soul, and sitting in the back pew of the church. I didn't want to sit in the front pew anymore. I'm like, I don't even want to go to church anymore. I'm just like feeling life is over. And I'd been very active in my community, in my church, and up until that time. And I felt like I would never be able to contribute truly. It's in my journal. I would not be able to contribute to society or make a difference in God's kingdom at 37 years old, 38. And so if I didn't believe that God was part of my life and that he truly is, I would have been completely hopeless and never been able to make a comeback like I did. So I want to say to all those out there who feel like life is passing you by and you're 30 maybe, or you're almost 40.
Or 50 or 60.
50 or 60. I mean, exactly. It's never too late. There's always, begin to look at what you've experienced in life and bring all of your experience up to wherever you are right now today and realize, listen, you overcome a lot. You now are 50 years old. Maybe your kids are now graduating and they're in college and they've been graduated from college. They have their own life. It's a perfect time for you to start a new life. And for me at 40, I started a brand new life, a life that I had never dreamed of, never thought was possible. But it's never too late. So if you have a dream and you feel like it died, let me tell you, if it's a dream that was birthed by God and you, you can bring it back to life again by simply believing and thinking about this dream, bringing it to life in your own mind, in your own heart. Begin to talk to other people or close friends about the dream that you had when you were 20 or 30 or 40. And I think life has passed me by. It's too late now. Let me tell you, no. The best years of my life were between the ages of 40 and 65. The best years of my life. I'm older than that now, but I'm beginning a new mission that I'm as excited about today as I was at the age of 40 when I started PTM. How can that be? I don't know. But there's always more, Bob. There's always more.
It's amazing.
It's never a good time to quit.
It's never a good time to quit. And it's amazing that here you are, you're in that church, you're in your late 30s. You think that you're as you're recounting this, I can see the emotion in your face. And I can hear the emotion in your voice, and you're reliving that moment where you're like, my life feels over. You're at your deepest, darkest hour, and little did you know that God's got His greatest victory for you just around the corner. It's like literally a year and a half later, you're starting Auntie Anne's Pretzels. That has this that becomes this international success story that's impacting lives and communities all across the world. I'm a firm believer. I've shared this with people. I see it in my life that it's in the middle of some of my deepest, darkest hours where the seeds of my best or my greatest victories God was planting. And so anytime somebody is in one of those moments, you're like, oh my goodness, I feel full of despair. I feel full of hopelessness. You know what? I don't understand what's happening. I'm usually, if I'm around that person, they're sharing that with me. I'm like, hold on, time out. Is that how you feel? Whoa, take a deep look. I'm telling you right now, somewhere in your life, the very seeds of your greatest victory are being planted right now.
So right. And I use the line all the time, out of our pain, our purpose was being formed. And so a lot of your listeners today, you don't have to go further than your next door neighbor. I just met with a lady last night, and you don't have to go any further than your next door neighbor to understand that there is the people that we know have a great deal of pain in their life, either in the past or in the present. And, but if we can encourage people, like you just said, that out of our pain, our deepest purpose, our purpose is being formed. Now, I know that doesn't make any sense to anyone right now in pain, but let me tell you, I hope that you've been listening to this podcast, and understand that of all the people in the world, I was the most hopeless. Of all the people in the world, there was not a CEO in the world that would have come looking for me to be the CEO of a new franchise organization. Nobody knew me. Nobody believed in me. I didn't even believe in myself. But God came looking for me. Mm-hmm. He knew that I was qualified because he had seen me in all of my pain, and he had seen me overcome it all with his help. Mm-hmm. He saw the potential in me that the overcoming my pain had created for me. Overcoming all these things made me strong, made me passionate, filled me with compassion. It filled me with a love for other people that I would never have had if I would have started this franchise when I was 25 years old and knew it all. So by the time I started, Bob, there's not much that I knew. I didn't know anything about business, truly. But what I did know was that through all of that, God saw me, he got us through, and as I began to develop Auntie, I began to see the redemption and the plan that he had all along for my husband and my family's life. It's a beautiful thing. Don't ever give up on yourself, and don't give up on God.
Wow. What there's nothing else I can say. I think that's the absolute perfect way to end this podcast. What a blessing it's been to be able to once again chat with you. I remember walking away from our earlier recording and just being moved, and I had learned a lot. I'd taken a lot of notes, and every single time, Ann, I get together with you and we talk, I walk away motivated, inspired, encouraged, and that's my hope and prayer for all the listeners who will be listening to this podcast. As a recap, we at the beginning of this one, we started talking about advice that you would give my 4 daughters, and what we as parents can be doing for our children to help equip them in a very tumultuous, ever-changing, fastly changing a global economy. We talked about responsibility and discipline and the importance of being a self-starter and being accountable and developing those soft people skills. And then the story arc, as you talk about starting a company at the age of 40, how you became a lifelong and voracious reader and learner, even in the midst of all of your busy schedule. You're getting up in the morning, you're reading leadership books and marketing books and anything you can possibly get your hands on to be equipped. You have this vast repository of knowledge because you had to grind it out. You were talking about many mornings getting up and being overwhelmed with all the details that you had to navigate, but you made a list and you just started ticking those things off one after the next, taking one step in front of the other, and all of a sudden you're making progress, and one day turns into a week, turns into a year. All of a sudden you have a ton of expertise and knowledge. You then start imparting this with your sister and others in your very first store. And then all of a sudden one store turns into 2, and you're creating training programs to impart that knowledge onto other folks. And then you kind of help land the plane at the very end here, talking about it was in the moments, like right before you had one of your greatest successes in your career, and right before you're sitting in a church thinking, I've come to the end of my rope. It's dark. I'm depressed. I'm hopeless. I don't know just where do I go from here? And little did you know that God had been watching you, helping you navigate your steps, giving you all the strength, all the knowledge that you need. And here you are in that moment, right around the corner is going to be birthed one of your greatest victories in life that impacted so many people. And I want people to remember that particular point. There's a lot of people right now that are hopeless in life. They might be in a bad relationship. They might have lost a job. A lot of people are fearful because of things that we're constantly seeing in the media and so forth. And there's just, as you read the newspaper, as you hear commentators talking, there's restlessness and hopelessness that's permeating communities all across the globe. And people need to be injected with hope for a better future, and understanding that there's not one person on this planet that is a mistake. Every single person is uniquely made, uniquely gifted, with a purpose, with a mission to impact the world. And when we find out how, and we live in alignment with our Creator God, and we start living out our mission and purpose in life, it's life-giving, not only for us, but for others. And so I want people anyone listening today who might be finding themselves in a spot where you're hopeless, you're tired, maybe fearful, not knowing what God's got in store for you. I want you to remember, at your deepest, darkest hour, are the seeds of your greatest victory are being planted.
Yes. Bob, so well said, and a great wrap up for my whole life right there. But thank you, and really, it's my purpose now. It really hasn't changed, but it's all about giving people hope. And giving people hope by sharing my life story. And I'm just so grateful for that we can do this today for your listeners. And I pray that people are filled with hope and that they learn how to get up or that they know they can get up. We don't have to stay down and discouraged and depressed, but we can rise above it. But so thank you, Bob, for the recap on my story. Beautifully done.
Well, I'm looking forward to having you come in and speak at one of our events. I know as soon as our internal audience hears this, and I'm sure it's going to go to all corners of the globe, and many people will hear this podcast and be encouraged and motivated. But I know our internal Bondvera community will be super excited to have you at one of our conventions here in the near future. And so offline, I'm going to get together with you and have you come in. I think it'll be fantastic. My daughters can't wait to see you again. They remember meeting you here in Knoxville, and they're like, yeah, she's the one that gave us those Auntie Anne's Pretzels coupons. And they had so much fun going to our little store here in the mall just a couple miles away, and we took it in there, and they were so proud to be like, hey, I know the founder. And so it was so fun.
Tell them if we meet again, I'll bring them coupons. So it's up to you, Bob.
All right. Well, hey, I'm going to take you up on it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a wonderful time this afternoon. Once again, I'm Bob Dickey, your host of Taking the Leap podcast. Our incredibly talented guest this afternoon was Ann Beiler, the founder of Auntie Anne's Pretzels. And what an amazing, heartwarming story and encouragement. I hope each and every one of you have taken great notes. We'll make sure to put the books that have been referenced and the various tools and resources in the show notes once again. But until next time, go out, make a difference with your life. Know that you have a mission and a purpose, and that each and every one of us are uniquely designed to have a huge impact in this globe. God bless you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Taking the Leap podcast with your host, Bob Dickey. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at www.takingtheleappodcast.com and bonvera.rocks. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are distributed. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Taking the Leap.